When my older sister grabbed the microphone during my first dance, tapping it twice while the acoustic guitar faded into dead silence, everyone in the glass ballroom gasped. They looked at her floor-length, ivory silk wedding gown, an exact shade replica of mine, and then at her trembling, tear-streaked face. She leaned into the speaker, smoothed her hand over her stomach, and announced to my 200 wedding guests that she was 3 months pregnant with her dream child. The room erupted into a wave of awkward murmurs and scattered, hesitant applause. My mother immediately burst into theatrical tears of joy from table 1, reaching out to embrace her golden daughter. My sister looked over the top of the microphone straight at me, expecting to see me break down, run out of the room, or scream in sheer humiliation. She wanted a scene. She wanted to prove, on the one day that was supposed to belong to me, that she would always be the main character in our family. But a sound escaped my throat that nobody in that room was expecting. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I smiled, stepped toward the center stage, and picked up the second microphone sitting on the head table. I looked at the crowd, turned to my sister, and handed the main floor microphone directly to a sharp-dressed man sitting at table 7. My attorney, Mr. Harrison, stood up, unbuttoned his navy blazer, and pulled a thick, court-stamped legal folder from his briefcase. The entire room went dead silent. Before we dive into how my sister's calculated wedding hijack turned into the public destruction of her entire life, follow my story until the end and comment the city or country you are watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Sarah, and I am 28 years old. For as long as I can remember, my existence in the Miller household was reduced to an afterthought. My older sister, Lauren, was 30, and from the day she was born, my parents treated her like royalty. If Lauren wanted an expensive designer dress, my parents maxed out their credit cards to buy it for her. If she failed a class in college, my parents blamed the professors and paid for private tutors. Meanwhile, I worked 40 hours a week at a local coffee shop throughout my entire finance degree just to cover my own tuition and rent. My father, a mid-level corporate executive who obsessed over social status, treated me like a resident employee whose sole job was to support Lauren's spotlight. My mother was even worse, constantly comparing my quiet, hardworking nature to Lauren's loud, dramatic personality. The only real source of unconditional love I ever had growing up came from my maternal grandmother, Alina. Grandma Alina was a sharp, fiercely independent woman who had built a successful commercial real estate business from the ground up after my grandfather passed away. She saw right through my parents' toxic favoritism. She was the one who sat with me at my kitchen counter, helped me study for my financial analysis exams, and taught me how to read corporate balance sheets. "Sarah," she used to tell me, holding my hands in her warm, weathered palms, "don't ever let them make you feel small. Silent waters run deep, and one day your discipline will build a life they can only dream of." When Grandma Alina passed away 18 months ago from a sudden stroke, my heart was completely broken. She had been my anchor, but before her body was even placed in the ground, my parents and Lauren were already circling her estate like vultures. Grandma Alina owned a sprawling 4-acre estate in the countryside valued at nearly $2.5 million, along with a sizable investment portfolio. 2 weeks after the funeral, my father called a family meeting at their house. I sat in the living room as my mother passed around copies of a legal document. My father stood by the fireplace with his hands in his pockets, declaring that Grandma Alina's final will had left everything, the property, the cash accounts, the heirlooms, entirely to Lauren. The document stated that I was to receive a small, token cash distribution of $10,000, while Lauren was named the sole primary beneficiary and executor of the estate. My mother wiped away fake tears and said, "Your grandmother knew that Lauren has higher artistic aspirations and needs the support, Sarah. You're so good with money and so resilient, you don't need an inheritance like your sister does." Lauren sat on the sofa, twirling a strand of her hair, wearing a smug, victorious grin that made my blood run cold. She didn't offer a single word of comfort. She just looked at me like I was a beggar receiving scraps from her table. I knew in my gut that something was deeply wrong. Grandma Alina had explicitly told me just 6 months before her death that her estate would be split evenly between Lauren and me, with a special provision for her real estate property to be placed under my management because of my financial background. But at the time, I was so consumed by grief that I couldn't find the strength to fight them. I accepted the $10,000 check, packed up my grandmother's old photo albums, and walked away. I threw myself into my work at a top accounting firm, building a quiet, successful life. 6 months after the funeral, I met David. David was a brilliant, grounded civil engineer who loved me with a fierce, quiet devotion I had never experienced before. He didn't care about flashy social status or high society games. He listened to me, supported my career, and made me feel safe. When David proposed to me on a quiet beach trip a year later, I thought my parents might finally show a shred of genuine happiness for me. Instead, when we announced our engagement at a family Sunday dinner, my mother immediately sneered at David's modest background, calling him a simple construction worker, while my father openly questioned whether we could even afford a decent venue. Lauren sat across the table, rolling her eyes and interrupting our news to talk about her upcoming trip to Paris. That dinner was the moment the final thread snapped inside me. I realized that no matter what I accomplished, no matter how much love I poured into this family, I would always be the villain in their story if I didn't let them step on me. David took my hand under the table, looked at me with deep understanding, and whispered, "We don't need their approval, Sarah. We build our own family." We planned our wedding for the following summer. I paid for every single detail out of my own hard-earned savings and David's income. We booked a stunning glass conservatory venue overlooking a historic garden, hired a top-tier live acoustic band, and invited 200 of our closest friends, colleagues, and extended family members. But as the wedding date approached, Lauren's envy turned into pure poison. She couldn't handle the fact that I was having a high-end, elegant wedding while her own life was stalling out. She had spent the last year blowing through hundreds of thousands of dollars from Grandma Aliner's estate on designer clothes, luxury vacations, and failed business ventures. 3 weeks before the wedding, Lauren dropped a bombshell on my mother. She announced that she was pregnant by her on-again, off-again boyfriend, a man with no steady job who was notorious for taking advantage of her money. Instead of being concerned about Lauren's chaotic life, my mother was ecstatic. She immediately began trying to turn my wedding into a dual celebration. She called me repeatedly, insisting that I allow Lauren to make a formal pregnancy announcement during my reception dinner. "Sarah, it's a family milestone," my mother demanded over the phone. "You need to share the spotlight with your sister. It's only fair." I set a firm, unyielding boundary. "No, Mom," I said calmly. "This is David's and my wedding day. Lauren can host her own baby shower or announcement party whenever she wants, but my wedding reception is not her venue." My mother flew into a rage, calling me selfish, cold-hearted, and jealous of my sister's happiness. Lauren sent me nasty text messages claiming I was trying to ruin her moment, but I held my ground and refused to yield. What none of them knew was that, while they were obsessing over wedding spotlight battles, a massive storm was quietly brewing beneath their feet. 2 months before the wedding, I had been organizing some old boxes in my apartment when I came across a small, locked leather journal that Grandma Aliner had given me years ago, along with a spare set of keys to her private safety deposit box at the downtown bank. I had completely forgotten about the keys in the haze of my grief. Suspicious, I took an afternoon off from work and visited the bank. Inside Grandma Aliner's private safety deposit box, I found the original, certified copy of her true last will and testament, drafted by her longtime personal estate lawyer just 3 months before her passing. The document was crystal clear. Grandma Aliner had willed the $2.5 million estate and all her liquid assets equally to Lauren and me, but with an explicit strict clause. The real estate property was placed entirely in a private trust under my sole control, and any attempt by either beneficiary to alter the will or mismanage estate assets would result in immediate, total forfeiture of their share. Attached to the true will was a handwritten note from Grandma Aliner. "Sarah, my sweet girl, if you are reading this, protect what I built. Do not let your sister or your parents destroy your future." I was stunned. The document my father had presented 18 months ago was a complete fake. I immediately hired Mr. Harrison, one of the most formidable forensic estate attorneys in the state. Mr. Harrison launched a quiet, covert investigation. Within 4 weeks, his team uncovered horrifying evidence. Lauren, with the active help of my mother and an unethical notary public who was a close friend of my father, had forged Grandma Aliner's signature on a fake will while she was hospitalized in her final days. They had illegally transferred the title of the $2.5 million house into Lauren's name, taken out a massive $1.2 million equity line of credit against the property, and spent nearly $800,000 of it funding Lauren's lavish lifestyle and paying off my parents' personal debts. It wasn't just family favoritism anymore. It was felony grand larceny, bank fraud, and forgery. Mr. Harrison wanted to file charges immediately, but I looked at the calendar and saw my wedding date approaching. I knew how my family operated. If I served them with a lawsuit privately, my mother and father would spin the narrative, call everyone in our extended social circle, and claim I was a bitter, greedy daughter trying to sue my grieving family right before my wedding. They would play the victims, stain my reputation, and turn my wedding into a dark cloud of pity and drama. "No, Mr. Harrison," I said, leaning back in my office chair with cold, absolute clarity. "We wait. We gather every receipt, every forged signature document, every bank transfer record, and every police report draft. You will come to my wedding as my honored guest, and when they try to step on me one last time, we drop the hammer." The morning of the wedding arrived. The sky was clear, and the glass conservatory was filled with natural sunlight and white floral arrangements. I wore a beautiful, simple A-line gown with delicate lace sleeves. I felt like a queen standing beside David as we exchanged our vows in front of 200 guests. My parents sat in the front row, looking visibly bored, while Lauren sat beside them scrolling through her phone, wearing a dark scowl. When the ceremony ended and the reception began, the energy in the room shifted. Guests were enjoying the gourmet dinner, the drinks were flowing, and the live band was playing soft music. Then came the moment for our first dance. David took my hand, led me to the center of the polished wooden dance floor, and the band began playing our song. We were twirling slowly under the twinkling fairy lights when suddenly, the music cut off with a loud, screeching feedback sound. I turned around. Lauren was standing near the bandstand, holding the main wireless microphone. But it wasn't just her presence that made the entire room gasp. It was what she was wearing. Lauren had gone back to the bridal suite during dinner and changed out of her bridesmaid dress into a floor-length, heavily embellished, pure white silk wedding gown, complete with a small white veil. She looked like a caricature of a bride. My mother sat at table 1, grinning wildly, holding her phone up to record. My father sat beside her with his arms crossed, a smug look of satisfaction on his face. They had planned this whole stunt together. Lauren tapped the microphone twice. Her voice echoed loudly through the glass conservatory. "Attention, everyone," she announced, her voice dripping with artificial emotion. "I know tonight is supposed to be about Sarah, but I have a piece of news that is far too important to keep secret any longer. As many of you know, family is everything to us. And tonight, I am beyond blessed to announce that I am expecting a miracle. I am 3 months pregnant with a beautiful baby girl." The room went completely dead silent. 200 guests sat frozen in absolute shock. Friends looked at each other in horror, disgusted by the sheer disrespect of a sister wearing white to a wedding and hijacking the first dance to make a personal announcement. My mother instantly stood up from her chair, clapping loudly and yelling, "Bravo, Lauren! A new blessing for our family." Lauren held the microphone close to her lips, looking straight at me with a cold, triumphant smirk. She expected me to burst into tears. She expected David to get angry. She thought she had effectively stolen my wedding day, turned the spotlight on herself, and asserted her dominance over me forever. Instead, I looked at David. David gave my hand a gentle, supportive squeeze, a subtle smile playing on his lips. I let go of his hand, stepped toward the head table, and picked up the secondary microphone. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't sound frantic. My tone was as level and cold as ice. "Thank you, Lauren," I said into the microphone, my voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. "Congratulations on your announcement. But since tonight is about full transparency and family milestones, I think it's only fair that we share one more announcement with all 200 of our friends, colleagues, and family members here tonight." Lauren's smirk flickered. My mother's loud clapping stopped midair. I pointed toward table 7. I'd like to introduce everyone to Mr. Richard Harrison, senior partner at Harrison and Associates. Mr. Harrison stood up from table 7. He was wearing an impeccably tailored navy suit, holding a heavy manila folder stamped with official county court seals. He walked steadily toward the dance floor, the rhythmic click of his dress shoes echoing in the silent room. 4 hours ago, I continued into the microphone, looking directly into my mother's wide, horrified eyes. The state superior court officially issued a formal injunction and criminal referral regarding the estate of my late grandmother, Eleanor Miller. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Extended family members, aunts, uncles, and cousins who had been lied to for 18 months leaned forward in their seats. Mr. Harrison reached the center of the room, pulled a set of legal documents from the folder, and spoke directly into his lapel microphone, his deep, authoritative lawyer voice filling the hall. On behalf of my client, Sarah Bennett, we are formally serving Lauren Miller, Diane Miller, and Walter Miller with a temporary restraining order, an emergency asset freeze, and a civil summons for grand larceny, bank fraud, and document forgery. Lauren's face went from smug victory to a sickly, ghostly pale white in under 3 seconds. The microphone in her hand began to tremble violently. What is this?" she stuttered, her voice cracking. "Sarah, what are you doing? This is a joke." "It's no joke, Lauren," I said calmly, stepping closer to her. "You, Mom, and Dad thought you pulled off the perfect heist when you forged Grandma Eleanor's signature on a fake will 18 months ago to steal her $2.5 million estate and cut me out. You thought I was too soft, too weak, and too desperate for your love to notice." My father sprang up from table 1, his face turning bright purple with rage. "Sarah, shut your mouth right now. How dare you make up these disgusting lies in front of our guests?" "Sit down, Walter," Mr. Harrison warned sharply, pulling a second document from his folder and holding it up for the room to see. "We have the forensic handwriting analysis from the state crime lab proving the signature on the probate will was forged. We have the bank records showing $800,000 of unauthorized credit line withdrawals transferred directly into Lauren Miller's personal accounts and Walter Miller's shell company. And most importantly, we have the original, valid will retrieved from Eleanor Miller's private safety deposit box." The room erupted into absolute chaos. Extended family members began shouting in disbelief. "They did what?" an aunt yelled from table 3. Guests were pulling out their phones, filming the entire confrontation. My mother covered her face with her hands, sinking back into her chair as she realized that her pristine social image was being shattered into a million unrecoverable pieces in front of everyone she had ever tried to impress. Lauren dropped her jaw, staring at the legal papers Mr. Harrison held. You can't freeze the accounts," she shrieked hysterically, her eyes wide with sheer panic. "I need that money. I have payments due tomorrow on my car and my clothes. I'm pregnant." "The court has already frozen every single account tied to the estate, Lauren," I said, looking her dead in the eye without an ounce of pity. "Including the equity credit line. Every asset you purchased with stolen money is being attached by the court. The $2.5 million property has been returned to its proper trust under my sole management. And because you defaulted on 3 consecutive loan payments, the bank is initiating immediate recovery procedures against your personal assets." Lauren's knees literally buckled. She dropped the wireless microphone onto the wooden floor with a loud asterisk thud that echoed through the speakers. She collapsed onto her knees in her stolen white wedding dress, sobbing hysterically, clutching at my mother's skirt. My father stood frozen, his eyes wide, looking at the high-profile corporate colleagues and neighbors in the audience who were staring at him with pure disgust and contempt. 2 uniformed off-duty police officers, whom I had hired to manage security for the venue, stepped forward from the back entrance. Mr. Harrison handed them the certified court orders. The officers walked up to my parents and Lauren, politely but firmly informing them that they were being formally escorted off the property to prevent further disruption, and that local detectives would be contacting them the following morning for formal questioning regarding the fraud investigation. As the officers led my sobbing sister, my pale, trembling mother, and my completely ruined father out through the glass double doors of the conservatory, a heavy silence fell over the room. I stood in the center of the dance floor, holding my husband's hand. I took a deep breath, looked out at the remaining 200 guests, and smiled. "Now," I said softly into the microphone, "if the band would kindly restart our song. David and I would like to finish our first dance." Live band immediately struck up the acoustic guitar chords. The room broke into a thunderous, standing ovation. Cheers and applause filled the conservatory as David pulled me close, wrapping his arms around my waist. As we swayed under the fairy lights, I rested my head against his chest, feeling a deep, profound sense of peace wash over me. The long years of being erased, ignored, and stepped on were officially over. I had protected my grandmother's legacy, reclaimed my dignity, and secured my future. Over the next 6 months, the legal fallout was absolute. Faced with overwhelming forensic evidence and facing potential federal prison sentences for bank fraud, my parents and Lauren were forced to sign a total liability settlement. Lauren had to surrender all remaining luxury items, liquidate her sports car, and move into a tiny, one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town to pay off her massive personal debts. My father was forced to resign from his corporate position after the fraud charges became public knowledge, draining his remaining retirement savings to avoid criminal prosecution. They were left with nothing, no status, no wealth, and no control. I completely cut ties with all three of them, changing my number and blocking them across all platforms permanently. David and I used my grandmother's restored estate to build a beautiful, thriving horse sanctuary and organic farm, creating a life filled with genuine love, safety, and peace. Standing on my porch today, looking out over the rolling green hills of Grandma Aliner's estate with David and our newborn son in my arms, I know that justice isn't about revenge. It's about taking back your power and refusing to let toxic people rewrite your worth. Now I'm curious about you who are listening to my story. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have dropped the legal hammer at the wedding like I did, or would you have handled it privately beforehand? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to tell me the city or country you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. Thank you for watching until the very end.